What would the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris assault on the U.S. Supreme Court look like? Biden's been teasing on the campaign trail. Kamala Harris, she's the wing woman. We all knew that she was going to come out supporting whatever her physically and mentally deficient boss would come out and support. Well, the guessing game is over because on Monday, Joe Biden with Kamala Harris right behind him, he unveiled his plan to take on the U.S. Supreme Court. We're talking here about term limits for the justices, some sort of purportedly enforceable code of ethics on the justices, as well as a new constitutional amendment to overturn the Trump versus United States decision on presidential immunity. Who knows what else might come from this? Look, this is court packing by any other name. And at a bare minimum, it is half court packing. This is dangerous, dangerous stuff that the left is currently flirting with. And there's really no one better to join me to break it all down than Mike Davis, who is the president and founder of the Article 3 Project, where I am his colleague there as well. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. So, Mike, not a whole lot of surprises here. I think you and I both expected that this suite of so-called reforms was going to look a lot like it ended up looking like there. What do you make of it, though? I mean, this is a big deal from my perspective. What is the impact of this? Is it just a political talking point? Take it from there.
So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris tried to bankrupt Trump. They tried to throw Trump in prison for the rest of his life. They even tried to take him off the ballot. And when that failed, the Supreme Court stepped in and stopped that. What did Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do? They underfunded President Trump's Secret Service detail and nearly got him killed on live TV. And now they're trying to destroy the Supreme Court that is in Biden and Kamala Harris's way. This is a radical assault on judicial independence, a radical assault on the Supreme Court. They're trying to destroy the Supreme Court because it is our last line of defense, protecting us from government overreach and mob rule. And, the Marxist like Kamala Harris know that they can't win fairly and squarely, so they just want to destroy institutions that get in their way.
Right. So, I mean, that really is what is going on here, right? I mean, the left controls every meaningful body in America, political, legal, cultural, and civilizational. The Supreme Court that you clerked on is essentially the only last remaining center-right body that they don't currently have under their unanimous control. But what does it say about the state of their movement that they are now not just flirting with, they are actually proposing a full frontal assault to make the U.S. Supreme Court not merely the least dangerous branch that Hamilton spoke of in Federalist 78, but actually just a nothing branch, a branch that Congress can just trample over? What does it say about the utter contempt with which they treat the American Republic and our cherished constitutional order?
Yeah, these same Democrats who pretend like they're protecting democracy from Trump, who they call a tyrant, sure seem tyrannical themselves. I mean, I think Venezuela's Maduro has been taking notes from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, what's a way to grab ultimate control of a country and destroy a country is you take over other branches of government. You make the federal judiciary, you make the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts your puppets, and that who rubber stamp the power grabs that you're trying to take, and then you all of a sudden you have all power. Remember, these leftists are very upset that the Supreme Court, for the first time in 90 years, is a constitutionalist Supreme Court, President Trump's biggest and most consequential accomplishment of his first term. They may disappoint us from time to time on the Supreme Court, but they're pretty solid overall. And these leftists know that the Supreme Court is in their way. The Supreme Court understands our Constitution is a loan agreement between we the people and our governments, and we loan our governments specific, enumerated, and divided powers. And what powers we don't give them, they don't have. And what powers we give them are supposed to be divided. They don't like this. These dictators, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and these dictators in the executive branch want to control our lives. And they don't want Congress to do it. They don't want judges to do it. They want to do it themselves, these unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats.
Yeah, and one key point here that I think people have to bear in mind This is not only not your grandparents' Democratic Party, this is not your parents' Democratic Party. Joe Biden in 2005, when he was a senator from Delaware, went on the floor of the U.S. Senate and gave a somewhat eloquent speech. Hard to believe, I know. And this is when he obviously had more brain cells operating between the ears. But he gave at least a semi-eloquent speech praising the Senate Judiciary Democrats of 1937 who rejected FDR's court packing scheme. Now here he is, 19 years later, doesn't have his wits about him, and he's basically just an empty vessel for the Democrats to project all of their various desires onto him. But, Mike, speaking of Democrats projecting all of their various desires, they have a radical far-left presumptive nominee at this point in Kamala Harris. She has been on record in the past for taking all sorts of crazy Looney Tunes positions. I'm still waiting a week and a half after she was tapped by Biden to be the successor. Now, I'm still waiting for kind of the response to start carpet bombing the airwaves. I think it's only a matter of hours at this point there. When that happens, because it should be coming imminently, what should that look like? What should the Republican response to the Kamala Harris presidency or nomination, I should say, look like?
Kamala Harris is a left-wing radical. Her only accomplishments in her adult life are getting elected to office. And after she gets elected to office, she doesn't accomplish anything, right? Like, what has she done as the vice president? She was put in charge of our border by President Biden. Kamala Harris is the border czar. And what did she accomplish? She accomplished allowing in over 10 million illegal immigrants, unvetted and unvettable fighting age men from the worst trouble spots around the world. And we see the resulting migrant crime. She was also the deciding vote in the Senate as the vice president of the Senate, the tie-breaking vote for President Biden and Kamala Harris's spending sprees that caused our economy to go into turmoil. We have record inflation and record interest rates under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's because of Kamala Harris. So the two things that she did, she destroyed. She destroyed our border and she destroyed our economy. She has it where inflation is so high that people can no longer afford groceries. Interest rates are so high that people can no longer afford homes and cars and paying off their credit cards. We're seeing record defaults on credit cards. This is the Biden-Kamala economy and border, and she owns it. She's responsible for it.
Yeah, and she's also, as you and I both know, deeply sympathetic to all of the keffiyeh-clad radicals currently trying to burn down Washington, D.C., burn down the American flag, quite literally, at that tragic display outside Union Station last week. This is the same woman who literally posted a link to a Give, Send, Go, GoFundMe, whatever, to bail out the Black Lives Antifa rioters in the summer of 2020. So, they're trying to portray her, Mike, as some sort of prosecutor, Kamala the cop. This is a woman who has been on the side of the rioters and the anarchists, not exactly on the side of law enforcement. But, speaking of law enforcement, you alluded to this earlier. Many of us have not forgotten the fact that Donald Trump was almost assassinated on national television just a few weeks ago. The news cycle moves so quickly at this point that many people are just starting to move on. The Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheadle, finally out. The FBI, Christopher Wray, speaking of law enforcement, they find themselves in something of hot water at this point now. What is going to happen, Mike? Are we actually ever going to get to the bottom of this absolute scandal of the highest order, how a president came within millimeters of taking a bullet to the face on national television?
Yeah, I blame President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for what happened to President Trump on July 13th. You have the Biden Kamala campaign strategy that President Trump is an existential threat to democracy, a dictator who must be stopped at all costs. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to imprison him for life. They tried to throw him off the ballot. That all didn't work. And so then they, again, underfunded Trump's Secret Service detail. The Biden-Harris administration denied several requests from the Trump from the Trump Secret Service detail, career professionals on his detail. They denied those requests while they were beefing up security for Ukraine President Zelensky. They denied beefing up security for American President Donald Trump. And then President Biden said that we need to put a bullseye on President Trump. I mean, what the hell did Joe Biden and Kamala Harris think was going to happen when you underfund Trump's security and then say he's a threat who must be stopped at all costs and then put a bullseye on him?